Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reviews where today we're going to be checking out the entirety of an album from an act named NineFingers titled Coast to Coast. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves the album on Bandcamp from NineFingers. Just going to get the album art up there. NineFingers and the Northern Imposters. We've got 6 tracks today, we're going to listen through each of those, and we've also got little bits of information about each track which we're going to read through for each, just for a bit of background. For a bit of context, so Coast to Coast is a collection of songs that blurs the lines between being autobiographical but also being songs about former basketball players. These basketball players are Elmore, Smith, Artest, Dennis Rodman, Andre Ingram, and Dion Waiters. In Elmore Smith, the king of Rejection, Nine delves into the hurt of an unexpected breakup and the feeling that your former partner will always live in regret for letting you go. So yeah, let's go. Elmore Smith. What do we got?
One day, someday far away.
It's kind of fresh for these guitars, eh?
Miss my presence on the inside, where I do my best work. On the inside, you will miss me.
Nice and peppy and upbeat.
How could you trade me in for Ferdinand? I swear that he will never take you where you long to go, and you will always regret dumping me on the streets of Milwaukee when I belong here in the bright lights. 17 reasons I gave you that night, because I am the king of rejection.
Just before we continue, when I said that it was upbeat, I didn't mean the lyrics. The lyrics are obviously quite... They're not very happy at all. I meant the backing behind it. There's a nice juxtaposition between those elements.
Try to remember October of 73. That's when you used to love me. After that, and we still can't take on the world to win it all, but you fall in for someone else. But one day, someday far away, you will miss my presence.
Nice neutral guitar line there, some pretty lead ideas.
Inside, where I do my best work. On the inside, you will miss me.
No, that was really charming. We had a rather simple composition there with the bass drum guitar parts, the female vocals in the background, la 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 la. The individual instruments themselves were doing different things and performed different functions. The bass would either support the low end filling and the sub resonances, or they were going da-da-dum, nice little hammer-on pull-off bits there, with the guitars being strummed or arpeggiated there for a little bit of extra mid-resonance nuance, or mid-range nuance. And the drums with the 8th note grooves and capacity there was nice and tight to listen to as well. Ultimately very cheery, and again, as I mentioned, a nice juxtaposition with the vocals there talking about someone. As I understand it, this track, I know we spoke about it here, but I do think it makes sense with what we talked about, the unexpected breakup, wondering if that person will forget you, or like regret leaving you, to get with Ferdinand. I'm sorry to hear that NineFingers had to go through this, to be fair. All in all, I'm pretty happy with the studio production so far as well. Artest, track number 2, Strongest Man in the World. He discusses some of the traumas of his past and his former refusal to participate in therapy due to the false idea in his head that as a strong man, he shouldn't need to seek external help to better resolve his internal problems. Fair point. I think that's a really brave song to make, so well done for making it, genuinely. It can be difficult to show vulnerability like that, but we're just going to continue. Artest. There's a warmth and a nostalgia to the way it's been produced. It sounds like kind of an old school kind of recording from the 70s or 80s or something like that. It's kind of pretty.
I carried your ghost all across the state. I carried the guilt and I carried the hate. I dragged all our memories here in my wake. I held all the tears and I held our mistakes in my chest. I'm the best in the world at holding the sky up on my shoulders. Atlas shrugged and the sky tumbled off, but I reached out and caught it, cause I could never let you down. I'm the strongest man in the world.
Seamless transition
I
there.
am the strongest man in the world. I am the strongest man in the world. I am the strongest man in the world.
Great halfway, higher harmonies.
Trails up high off the ground. I held back my screaming. I didn't make a sound, though it hurt. Every time that you strayed from our bed, the children are watching. I won't fuck the heads.
I mean, like, there is dynamic range to this as well. That got really intense for a moment. We're really trying to, I think, smooth out the emotional intensity of the backing there. A lot of the harshness or the heavy truths are being put through the storytelling.
Generational trauma. I'll hold it back here. I'll be the tribute.
I think it's kind of classy, to be honest.
Yes, the skies all collapsed, but I reached out and caught them, cause I could never let you down. I'm the strongest man in the world, cause I am the strongest man in the world. I am the strongest man in the world. I am the strongest. I am the strongest. I am the strongest.
Is that brass?
I am the strongest. I am the strongest.
There's an interesting room sound to the drum kit as well, with the ride cymbals and everything like that. It's close mic'd, but I kind of dig that. It almost kind of sounds like the claustrophobia that we're maybe experiencing, having to deal with all these intense feelings in our own head and thoughts and having to process them like that. And there were some catchy hook lines as well. Da 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 da. You know, like it was mod da 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 da. You know, there was modulation of that theme as well, kind of looped nicely into itself and was pleasant. You could kind of nod your head to it, and we had the fundamentals of music theory and composition down, but there was personality to it as well. As a final note, this seems very raw and organic. We don't seem like we're trying to sound like another artist or another musician. This is NineFingers in their journey, their direction through working all the stuff out for themselves, and we're just along for the ride. And again, I like the fact that we're being more moderate with our themes, to not get too sort of like negative or intense or grim with all of it together. Like, there's moderation with the backing or the main motifs there to kind of just make it a bit more palatable, I suppose, to people who aren't wanting too sort of like sad a time. Got track number 3 in Dennis Rodman, Master of Rebounds. He details a life of always being in the role of rebounding other people who have exited long-term relationships, and doing so without ever falling aside of his own feelings until he meets someone new he actually falls for, but soon starts to suspect that this time he's the one being used as a rebound. Because wasn't Dennis Rodman, like, he did like rebounds in basketball or something like that, right? Is that the kind of inference we've got there? Was Ron just really strong? I'm not sure. Was Elmore like a good blocker or something like that? I'm not sure. I don't know much about basketball, but I'm trying to sort of like join the dots, and I'm hoping I'm halfway there. Otherwise, I'm going to feel really silly.
I'm just a rebound, I know. I'm just a rebound, who cares?
Love the low range in his voice.
It's not like I fell in love for the first time in years.
Aww. And the space there, just letting the words hang for you to consider them while she's just sitting there at the dance watching the guy on his own. It's brutal, man. You feel like you're a voyeur to the conversation.
So who cares? It's not like the smell of you quickens my heart. It's not like the sight of you lights up the dark. And I'm just a rebound, I know. I'm just a rebound, who cares? It's not like the sex is the best that I've had in my life.
That's a stinger of a line. Wait, do we...
Who cares?
What, are we being sarcastic or not?
It's not like I spend nights alone, lying in bed with my phone.
I like the association of the romanticism of like an accordion, but then like the lack of romanticism because there is not a connection there because of the dissonance going on.
And quickly
It's an interesting angle.
check notifications while hoping for your invitation. 'Cause I'm just a rebound, a fling. I'm just a rebound. I know. It's not like I told them I love them. Well, they looked at me and just sighed.
Ooh.
It's not like I wished for forever.
Oh.
It's not like I wished for forever. It's not like I wished for forever.
Loving the extra intensity, the calling out there. It's very raw, the pain. You know?
Like I wished for forever. It's not like I wished for forever. It's not like I wished for forever.
I think the best way I can sort of interpret that track there, Dennis Rodman, Master of Rebounds, is it's discussing the dreams that we have with this person, the misty reverby kicks and guitars and keys and all that kind of stuff, and how those dreams have been dashed against the rocks, like we're still inside our head, maybe unable to cope with how things possibly could have been. It sounds like a brutal situation, to be fair. It's, again, really great that we're making music out of that, because that can honestly, that pain can be the best inspiration for tunes. We do seem to like our triplet groove, so, and I kind of dig that as well, because too often you get straight for 8th and 16th note accents, and I just don't think this would have had the same frustrated oral aesthetic to it. Before we continue, I also just want to sort of mention that I'm very impressed with how conversational some of the parts are. Like the who cares part, like there's a charisma to that and an energy that is really effective, because it illustrates that this is not just something he's saying just to get a reaction from the listener. This is an honest conversation he's having with whoever he's aiming this song at, because you get it. You can hear the frustration and just how completely done they are, and that's very powerful when you combine it with a relatively dreamy, moody theme there. That's major in tonality for the most part, but it's simply trying to show a positive front. Internally, things are an absolute sort of massacre, even if we're trying to show a strong face. And yeah, I think this is really clever stuff. Next, we've got Andre Ingram, Stayed Ready. Nine discusses a lifetime of failed relationships from the ages of 12 through 40, in which he feels he wasn't given a fair chance to show what he was really capable of as a partner. Now far out of his prime. It's brutal, man. He is given that chance and immediately shines. No, not brutal because I think that it's true. It's just 40, I guess because I'm getting older, 40 seems young, How now far out of his prime, he's given that chance and immediately shines in a role he'd spent his whole life preparing for. Well, we'll see how this goes. Andre Ingram, Stayed Ready. Oh, it's a little bit more upbeat.
Jackie
A little
broke
bit
my
quicker.
heart when I was 12 years old. She sent her friend to tell me we're through. My mother bought a guitar and she put it in my room. And that's the first night I played the blues. I sang,
Good job.
one day some
Would have been cool to have a bluesy thing there when he said the blues, but
When I fall for someone who loves me true, I will be ready for you. Amy took my breath away at 17 in the parking lot across from our school. But she'd smoke bedtime cigarettes with every pretty boy she met. So I sang songs while feeling a fool. I sang, one day someone will love me well. My heart hurts, but it grows stronger every day.
is there more accordion there?
When that day comes,
There is.
when I fall for
Or is it a harmonica? Hang on. Ah, there is accordion by Buddy Hell. There's a lot of people involved, actually. You've got music and lyrics by NineFingers, vocals NineFingers, accordion Buddy Hell, acoustic guitar Howard Ingram and NineFingers, backing vocals Cadet, Chris Kasuga, Rachel Freund, Luhan C, Haddon, Buddy Hale, and Doris Tetz. Bass Chris Kasuga, Howard Ingram, and cowbell Jordan Solomon, Chris Kasuga. Drums Buddy Hale, Jordan Solomon. Electric guitar Chris Kasuga, Howard Ingram, and glockenspiel Chris Kasuga. Man, Chris Kasuga can just do everything. Piano Buddy Hale, NineFingers. Shaker Buddy Hale. Trombone Benoit Shepard, and ukulele NineFingers. There's so many instruments in this. That's so exciting.
someone who loves me true, I will be ready for you. I was certain Anna was the one who turned things all around. When she was with me, I felt at peace. But she found church and God, it seems they didn't have any room for me. For I had just a single belief that
I mean, that's just dynamic range. That's just interesting composition to have everything kind of come out like that. That's old school as heck, but I love it.
one day someone will love me well. My heart hurts, but it grows stronger every day. And when that day comes, when I fall for someone who loves me true, I will be ready for you. La,
Toot toot. Oh, it's groovy, man.
place to place and
I love the little buzz rolls and stuff we have as a back. There's just so much personality and love put into this.
my hair turned gray. But every night I sang my little song. And then you finally appeared. You held my hand and volunteered a place where my heart could belong.
Nice resolution there harmonically.
I'm ready to love you well. My heart's strong. It's been training every day. I'm glad that you've come because now I'm someone who loves true and I am ready for you. I love true and I am ready for you. I love true and I am ready for you.
That's incredibly charming. I like the twist at the end, that we finally found that person and we're excited and stoked to be with them. Especially after tracks like Master of Rebounds and The King of Rejection, it sort of speaks to a journey that NineFingers is on through all this. And that's what I really need personally as a reviewer, is thematically for there to be a point to this collection. You know, it's okay to have a lot of really individually awesome tracks, but an album can be that much more special when there is a concept that is transient, that you can understand, and that just helps tie it together in a neat little bow. The backing vocals sounded super adorable that we had within the interlude and chorus sections, and the la 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 and little triangles as well that we had. We had nice buzz rolls on the percussion, fairly inoffensive and friendly sounding chord progressions of the guitar, bass, and other instruments. And ultimately, it's just really satisfying. And these songs are short as well. They're like between 2 and 3 minutes, and I've got to show a lot of love for that. They're getting a lot communicated in that frame. It's really dope. We've got track number 5, and Dion Waiters can't lose. He has been struggling with the idea that he can either focus on maintaining and enjoying his relationships, or he can dive full into music, trying to balance these two worlds is something that has often caused him a lot of anxiety and prevented him from truly moving forward in any direction. He comes to the realization that his life is actually exceptionally enjoyable in every direction available to him, and that no matter which choices he makes, he is capable of having a lovely and fulfilling life. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're at a point where like you get to a certain age or you get to a certain position and it eventually becomes possible to have a healthy relationship and a passion and a career in music, right? And if that's the place that NineFingers has gotten to, that's phenomenal. And if NineFingers feels differently and there's no way to have both, and that's fine too, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to tell him how to live his life, but we're going to listen through his tale anyways. Track number 5, Dion Waiters, Can't Lose. Hell of a tone of that distorted bass.
Let's dance, 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 dance the night away. Lift your bottles, spray the champagne. 'Cause when the morning comes, I will walk away. But tonight we can drink, we can shout, we can dance, dance, dance. And dance, dance, dance. And dance, dance, dance. Dance, 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 dance. Because tonight I'm filled with fire, don't you feel the same? I have a tendency to shoot my shot whenever it rains.
Hang on a minute. Sorry, my cat just leapt at a nearby window and like thudded into it, so I got a fright there and was worried that she'd hurt herself. Oh, give me a fright. It does sound fairly groovy. It's nice to have an extra bit of intensity with the distorted parts, the bass, etc. the drums. We're showing a really healthy confidence as well on our performance that makes all the difference. It's just really, we really know how to emote to suit the mood. Oh, nice resolution of that. It's cool.
It doesn't matter what the outcome is, I win either way. I'll be a champion forever by the end of the day. And then I'm turning in my uniform and heading back home. 'Cause I am leaving from the top so that you can't take my throne. Let's dance, 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 dance the night away. Lift your bottles, spray the champagne. 'Cause when the morning comes, I will walk away. But tonight we can drink, we can shout, we can dance, dance, dance. Dance, dance, dance. Dance, dance, dance. Dance, 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 dance.
Sick. Fantastic. To be honest, I'm not sure which single off of this album is the single. Do you know what I mean? Like there's 6 tracks and all of them have so far been fairly strong. But if this is not close to the top, I'd say this is probably one of the strongest tracks, simply for its general catchiness, the incredible energy to it. There's just, I think it's party music, right? It's something you get up and you dance and just enjoy yourself. And I think that, a lot of the time I've heard tracks like about dancing, enjoying yourself, and it just seems kind of, how do I describe it? It seems insincere, as if they're like, yo, just dance, like we have created this music for you to dance to. But it's almost like, NineFingers is trying to demonstrate the way he feels about the situation, encouraging you to get involved. There's an edginess with the guitar tone that I appreciate, as if we're taking a risk and a chance for life and we're not allowing ourselves to regret our decisions. So I think it's fantastic. The only thing I'd say is that things kind of seemed a little bit close in presence to the middle of the stereo field there. I'm going to keep an eye on it with the next track, Light the Beam, featuring Fake Canadian. But I just want to confirm that there's enough width in the stereo field, because it seems like things should be wider, but I could just be tripping. We've got Light the Beam featuring Fake Canadian as NineFingers' total embrace of the city he now calls home, Sacramento. Invigorated by the purple victory beam he'd so often see in the sky, NineFingers would walk down to the Golden One Center after his shows so that he could stand under the light of the beam and feel it radiating a feeling of victory and purpose. Nice! It was while under the beam that Nine decided it was time for him to start winning as well, and as a thank you to the Sacramento Kings for showing him how, he set out to write an anthem for their fans to sing at the end of home game wins. It is a celebration of the city of Sacramento, the Kings, and the very nature of starting to win and embrace your victories. That's beautiful. I'm looking forward to hearing an anthem. Super powerful. The guitars, bass, drums, more of the triplet flow. We've had more triplets in this as I understand it than we have. It just seems we like that sort of like dance groove, that shuffle there. But just the crowd chanting kind of makes you think of like a sports game, so it's dope.
Winning is all I do. Winning is all that I know how to do because I forgot how to lose. I don't remember what it's like to lose because winning is all I do. I win every day and I win every night because winning is all that I do. So light the beam, light the beam, Sacramento, raise your eyes up to the skies and say goodbye to darker days and darker nights. A new light shines, a new age dawns.
I mean, like, I think it's really charming. It's clearly paying homage to his new hometown, to his new place of residence there. Showing a little bit of a, it's showing a little bit of love to that. I think there are people that will appreciate this. I mean, there's people here who think, such as Fetal Face, think that Light the Beam is their favorite track. There's careful development of the arrangement, such as in the initial verse part where we had extra guitar riffs in the second half that we didn't have at the first. Things floated. Clearly aware of the fact that we cannot just have the same thing for too long. We're switching things up, even a shorter form factor track to kind of keep things engaging. Like, what's going to happen next?
Light the beam, light the beam.
Really fascinating snare tone. Not sure if I'm super happy with that, but everything else sounds kind of dope. Sick solo though. That was a really charming guitar solo at the end. I like how it harmonized on top of itself. Like, we didn't think we'd have twin guitar solos, but we had that. It kept in a similar phrasing as some of the earlier components with the lead works, with a little bit of extra kind of spice with some of the 16th bits. But yeah, it was just really charming, simple to understand, simple to sing along to, which is part of why it works as an anthem. It's catchy, there was dynamic range to it, things went the same perceived loudness the whole time. And ultimately, aside from not being necessarily sure about the snare tone, everything about that was dope. I completely understand why it was made, and I think it's a good song. Welcome to the conclusion of my review of this album from an act named NineFingers titled Coast to Coast. Now, my interpretation of what this album is about, I've spoken about the various tracks and what I think they're about. Now, we also read about what the track was about in the intros of each of the tracks, but to cut to the chase, what I think this album is about, NineFingers coping with the complexities, the relationships, rejection, rebounds, etc., finding their purpose, learning that mental health is something that they don't just need to be strong all the time, and it's okay to get help if you need it, and basically realizing that there are positives regardless of which choice you take. Nothing is universally negative, most things are not universally negative. And then, waiting for that love despite all the difficulties you've had, and then, of course, celebrating the place they live. That's basically what this was about. And I think that this was a great album for NineFingers to release. It was really easy to listen to, and, I could appreciate the work and effort that went involved in the various components there. It was a very cozy listen. The vocals were really splendid to hear. We had interesting vocal melodies and harmonies there that were engaging and sounded nice and appropriate for the various motifs that they were sung over. The hidden chest voice was good, but it wasn't just the fact that we sung, it was also some of the spoken word bits, like the Master of Rebounds part, where it's okay. Things were a bit more sort of low-key and that one a bit more sad. It was just us kind of coping with what had occurred before, and there was personality and sass and charisma to a performance with that in a different way than there was to others, but it's clear that NineFingers was intimately, and they were really paying close attention. They put a lot of effort into communicating the way they needed to and the way they wanted to, and ultimately it seems like it was a passion project that they should be very proud of. I do like the various other backing vocal parts in there as well, from the lady vocalists and the chants and the beam and such. I think they were splendid and cheerful to listen to, and when it wasn't necessarily the most positive vibe, it was still palatable, because we never really became too bitter or negative with anything aside from maybe the lyrics. There was a lightness to a lot of it, as if we weren't trying to over-egg the pudding, as if we're aware that if we got a little bit too kind of heavy on it, it could turn people off, and I think that that's an okay thing to do. We're not making death metal here, we're not making metalcore, that kind of stuff. There's some topics here that you probably wouldn't want to go much lighter with in the theme, for sure, but I think part of the reason why we kept these tracks between 2 to 3 minutes, part of the reason why we kept a relatively neutral to major motifs with a lot of them aside from tracks like Master of Rebounds, is simply because we wanted to allow the listener to sort of just hear us out without us trying to shove how they should feel down their throat. Yeah, I don't think there are any issues with the way that the vocals were sung or written. The stories that were told will be relatable to a lot of people. I'm sure there's definitely an audience for it. I mean, as per the feedback by the people who have downloaded the album, who clearly, some of them have written that they can relate to it, which means it was instantly a success, not just by the standard of NineFingers being happy with it, but it being released and other people being able to sort of get with it as well. But I think it was just the authenticity and how raw things were as well that makes it likable. Even if you don't necessarily agree with everything that's being said here, for whatever reason, I don't think there's anything detestable or anything like that was been said, but no matter what you think about the guy, you can trust what he's talking about, and you just feel that warmth there, and I appreciate it. And again, as I mentioned, with the tracks between 2 to 4 minutes, it was very respectful of the listener's time. The 2 to 4 minute sweet spot that I talk about, 2 minutes, if you go for less than 2 minutes, sometimes you can miss out crucial context to really flesh out a story. Going over for, you've had a couple, 2 to 3 verses, maybe plus an interlude if you're going really quick, a few choruses, and might even had an interlude at that time. That's quite a lot of real estate to use, so if you're going for a fast 4 minutes for the song, you kind of really need to be able to justify that with either a new section to it, or you need to have a solo part or something like that, or maybe a key change, just something to spice it up so that it's actually going to continue to be intriguing. We didn't have that issue here because they were short. A couple of verse sections per part, a couple of hook iterations there. We had some solo sections in Light the Beam at the end there. We had phrasings where things got a little bit quieter and there were changes with the motifs that were played in background there. We didn't have the same intensities with the various instruments all the time. We needed to develop them to add or take stuff back, or we simply had songs where we were purposefully making them big and bombastic, but then we would deliberately just find the right space where it was appropriate to kind of step off a bit and then do so. There was no filler in any of the tracks as far as I could tell. A few of my favorite instruments were the guitar parts. I think that the strummed open chords and some of the power chordy bits alongside the occasional leads that we had were really charming and They were really pleasant to listen to. There were no really harsh, gritty textures or intervals involved there. And even if we were talking about some sort of more kind of negative stuff or things that might not necessarily have naturally gone as well with the chord progressions we were playing, it was almost like that was an understood thing, and we didn't try to pay too much homage to that. We didn't want to sort of make it too obvious. We tried. I think part of what the joy of the backing was that it almost neutralized a bit of the sharpness of some of the lines. Bass was relatively low key. You know, like we had it in a low end and it supported when it needed to. Wasn't there all the time. A little bit of building and articulation in some of the other tracks there. We'll kind of do some hammer-ons and pull-offs, but ultimately it's just very, very reliable in the low end and had a great strength and foundation to it. The drums, they just kept moving forward with this triplet note groove, and I kind of dig the dedication to that. We had songs like, you know, Can't Lose, where we were just talking about dance and champagne and everything like that. So that was a little bit more sort of a straight sort of chord note accent flow there as per dance tracks. But usually it was more of a waltz through life that we had. And ultimately, I think that the drums were just reliable. They played some fills occasionally, we roll with 16ths, but usually it was a simple focus there with very occasional buzz rolls. The drummer knew where to pocket when need be. We knew when to bring it up a step with the dynamic range and the loudness of the tracks in bigger sections such as Light the Beam. And we basically explored the whole drum kit, which is always a joy. And then finally, I'd say my other favorite thing was the accordion. I think it was an interesting texture that we had occasionally, and it added a nice mid-range simmer to it. It was almost a sub-layer, but the reason it was also a joy is because it managed to find a niche in the stereo field and the frequency spectrum which weren't filled by the guitars or the vocals or the backup vocals or the bass or anything like that. And there were quite wide ranges, especially with some of those guitars playing open chords and covering a couple of octaves. The fact that the organ still had a place there and sounded natural without oversaturating the arrangement was really good. Overall, I think most of the tracks matched their motifs really well. There were personal ones I preferred, such as Light the Beam, which was just it was like a cheesy anthem. It had rhythm parts on the guitars go in sync with the vocal parts. It was very much in tune and in unison. It was a deliberate attempt at making something that was nice and simple to kind of nod your head and kind of get behind, and I kind of dig that. I like that. I think that works well if you're making an anthem. I think another of the motifs I liked was the Dennis Rodman one, the Master of Rebounds, simply because it was the one track where it sounded like he was in a bar with a drink going over the sadness and like talking to the woman how I suppose he'd expect to talk to her if she was able to be met at that point. It's an interesting, with like the reverbs that we had, like how we're inside our own head kind of coping with the regret and the difficulties associated. I just think that it was really meticulous with not only the studio production and the way that things were put together there, but also the actual quote-unquote vibe of the motif. It left you almost seeing them from like a third-person perspective. You can visualize that. I'm sure a lot of people could probably relate to people having to talk about their feelings and going through those motions. And there's a lot of space in that mix there to allow for NineFingers simply to speak his piece, even though the words don't come off, and so you're left there to kind of just process the information you've been given in a way that's really respectful, but also it's clever, because that is just a fantastic use of space. You know, you can write songs in two ways. One, you can attempt to keep the listener on the dial every single second with the knowledge that you need to keep them kind of pulling along so that they continue listening through the whole thing. Or you can allow the listener to you can just trust them to actually just hear you out. And that was one of those songs that did that. Finally, the studio recording, mixing and mastering was reasonably solid. I was really happy with the way that the vocals sounded in the mix. They sounded nice and organic. There wasn't a whole lot of filtering to them. The backing vocals as well sounded nice, like really warm and friendly and cheerful. Even when things got a little bit sort of negative, it was never ever too much. And I like the fact that there was really good takes. The guitars, the bass, and the drums were recorded well. I'm still undecided about the width of the instruments in the stereo field. I think that things could have been wider. I'm not sure how we did the drum recordings, whether we close mic'd them or we did XY stereo stuff or what we did there. It just seems like there's a lot of focus for some of these tracks around that center field. It would have been nice for all of them to have been wide enough stereo field to really make the most of that. But aside from that, they could just be the headphones. Aside from that, the leveling of the instruments in general was really good. I think that there were no resonant frequencies in the frequency spectrum, which is dope, so that was well handled there, not EQing and stuff like that. There was lots of use of like delays and reverbs and nice kind of wispy intonations there without sterilizing or overcomplicating any of the key components. There was dynamic range to this track. Things weren't the same per last all the time, and that's not just due to the arrangement of the performance with the note out of place. I think it also comes down to the how things were produced. And finally, it was nice and low without pumping, so the bus compression limiting was handled. I mean, effectively, this is my review of this album from NineFingers, titled Coast to Coast, and hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please do go check out their various social medias and their Bandcamp page. Stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they help more than ever with all the crazy stuff going on in the world, and I will catch you in the next review. Spiderhands Out.